Welcome back. 32 teams in 32 days. Summertime edition. Roster the people. We are almost done. We got 2 to go. Hi, Grandma. Hi. I know you're watching this one. I know you ain't going to watch them all, but I know that you're watching this. Yeah. Yeah.
Go
we got
Vol.
at least. What's that?
Oh, wrong Tennessee team. My bad.
Yeah. No, she wouldn't care about that either. We got at least one viewer. My 96-year-old grandmother from Nashville will tune into this. I guarantee it.
I love that.
So, there you go. So be nice.
Well, you didn't tell it, Neil. You should have told us beforehand. I would have, done my hair or something.
No. You're looking good. She likes the Brad Pitt look. It's looking good. Yeah. So there you go. There you go. It's the one thing that I know she'll watch. Is us breaking down the Tennessee Titans for the 2024 NFL season. Speaking of which, this is your draft primer for your fantasy football league for the 2024 NFL season. We're going to take you team by team. Today's the Titans. You're going to hear us reference a lot of ADPs and rankings. Those come courtesy of Fantasy Pros. Jason and I are part of the Fantasy Pros ECR. Our rankings get slushed into that. We'll talk about our own rankings should they become relevant if they are too far from what the averages are. Speaking of which, thank you, Fantasy Pros. Shout out to you. We love being one of your affiliates and working with you every year. Appreciate access to the Pro Tools. Beyond that, today is the 22nd of August, so we are getting close. We are week 3 of the preseason. Right now, it's happening. It's going on. So get ready for that. Beyond that, the wrap-up show will be live for you to watch on the 31st, Saturday, early morning. So that way everybody can get the last-minute updates that we're going to do just to make sure everybody's got the most current information possible for your draft. If you are drafting before Labor Day weekend, as we've told you for years, you are doing it wrong. Do a slow draft. Move to Sleeper. Sleeper, not a sponsor, just people we think are cool. Speaking of which,
have a really great UI.
They do. And also, they finally got it to work on your phone and your computer, which is nice. If you're old like me and you still do this on your computer, it's nice. If you're a young person like these two, it happens on your phone and it works good on your phone. So there you go. Like,
beautiful. It does burn through battery like crazy.
Oh my God. I thought my phone was dying. I thought my phone was dying. I left it open one day and I had a full battery and I came back like an hour later and I'm like, oh no,
it's on fire.
Why is my phone so hot? Like, what happened? So get in, get out is what I'm telling you. Don't have it open all day. It's not going to go well for your battery.
But they do push updates and all that kind of stuff, so that's also a nice feature of it.
Yes. So the wrap-up show will be live on the 31st. We're going to do a quick PSA on the wrap-up show about a new feature Sleeper has added. Again, not a sponsor, just people we think are cool. Something that people should be aware of for this season. It's a new feature that's going to change. It's going to change the game up. It's something that people have been asking for years that, honestly, I never thought they were going to get. So that's what they call in the business of tease, boys. Get people to tune into that wrap-up show, get the updated takes, get our conversation on Sleeper. That'll be up there on the 31st for you. Today's the 22nd, so obviously there is a Titans game between now and then. So if anything we say sounds a little bit dated, that would be why. But shouldn't be too much in the way of news coming out in the next week because most teams kind of go on hiatus for about a week. Thank the new CBA for that, for those of you who are old and are like, where's my week 4 preseason? Brr! Yeah, the players collectively bargained that. And one guy I know down there in the corner could not be happier that there isn't another slate of games
Thank
that
God.
he has to figure out. Yeah.
I have been under heavy, intense sweat, under the hot lights, just trying to figure out who's going to play this week, putting in the work, calling up the beat writers. It's been a hectic week. So I'm happy that the preseason's coming into an end and then we can head into the regular season for sure.
Bro, that's like week 18.
Exactly. Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
It
like sucks.
But we're like here week for 18. It is like week 18 when most of us are like, meh.
Yet I still have to come to work.
Yeah.
That's you guys. What do you guys mean? I'm sitting here. We have to figure out who everybody's going to bet on after they're done with fantasy.
I know. I don't envy you your job of having to figure out the playoffs and the Super Bowl and week 18. And that's all
the real moneymakers, though.
It is the real moneymakers.
You take your fantasy winnings. I've always said this. You take the fantasy winnings that my colleagues here win you through the fantasy football season, and then you come to me, and then we bankroll it into more in the playoffs, and that's how it works.
Yeah, especially the Super Bowl bets because I like your Super Bowl. I've always liked your Super Bowl prop bets. I don't really bet on the playoffs because I can't be bothered because
It's all about the Gatorade,
I'm on
baby.
vacation by that point. I go on vacation. That's not even a joke. Like I literally go on vacation, and but I come back for the Super Bowl, and I love Mason's prop bets for the Super Bowl because I made they changed the rules for how to report taxes, but before that, when you didn't have to worry about it as much, I made a sizable amount of money on the over under that I didn't know existed until you told me about how many times they would have commercials for the Queen Latifah show, and they had set the line at 3, and I'm like, 3, 3, 3 is pitifully low. Here's a sarcastic amount of money, like, 'cause I knew, I'm like, they'll have 3 by halftime.
It's the
Like,
better Christmas.
That commercial will literally. I did use that money for birthday gifts actually later on because it was like they're gonna have 3 by halftime, and I was right because they did 1 a quarter, and then they did 1 for halftime, and I'm like, yeah. So they were like 3 for the whole game, and I'm like, have you never watched the Super Bowl? Like, come on now. They always advertise that lead-in show like 10 times. Like, come on now. That's the whole point of it.
Easy money.
Yeah. So the Titans. The Titans.
Oh yeah, we're talking about a team here.
We are. The Titans is an interesting one because this is a team that nobody wants to think about or talk about. Like they're not really projected to do much.
Everything's changed.
Well, things have changed to a point, but I mean, just even in the division, people are talking about the Colts to win the division. They're talking about, some people are talking about Jacksonville's done. Some people are talking about Jacksonville's in line for a bounce back year. You know, you got that going on, and then you kind of just have the Titans in the corner where nobody's talking about the Titans too much because I don't think the expectations are very high for this team. So
well, a lot of pressure starting with the guy we're going to begin with.
Because I think in Tennessee people are expecting a little bit more than what the general public is expecting because you got
Mr. Mayo.
Well, you do, Mr. Mayo. So you've got year 2 of Will Levis. So there it is. Will Levis opens as the QB 24. His ADP is right around 170. So Will Levis is being drafted as a low-level backup. It's an interesting kind of thing with Will Levis because we saw in his NFL debut, we saw Will Levis just go insane with 4 touchdowns and this huge yardage total, and then after that, kind of nothing. Just nothing. It's kind of made it hard to evaluate Will Levis in a real way because there's a lot of things. You can talk about lack of weapons. You can talk about him being a rookie. You can talk about the O-line being bad, and guess what? You'd be right. This year,
Correct.
It's a little bit different. So my question to you, Mason, is you've been following the Titans here along with all the other teams from a real football standpoint. What is your evaluation of Will Levis?
So when you look at this roster in general, and as Jason alluded to, there's a lot of new stuff on it. There's a lot of difference to it. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to maximize the veterans that they have in this system with their young quarterback and hoping that pans out, which has been a pretty successful approach to a lot of very successful teams over the last decade. The young Kansas City teams are one. Those young Eagles teams are one. That's a proven track record of success. Now, I think a lot of people are brushing off some of these weapons and things like that just because it's not really the big vogue thing right now. But I think they do have a lot of talent on this team. And it does start with Will Levis. When you look at Will, man, he is the scout's dream.
Mm-hmm.
When you go and scout quarterbacks, this is the kind of guy you want to see. Good size, a good arm, pretty decent footwork that he's gotten better with over camp. He has these things that you're like, man, we could really make this guy into a player. The tough thing is like you said, there's been a lot of inconsistency, and otherwise his processing is just too slow as a result.
Right.
He's got a big arm, but generally when you watch his tape, he doesn't pop out to you as a hunter, which is kind of what you want to talk about with these quarterbacks that hunt that big play, who push the ball down the field. Guys like CJ Stroud, who are constantly targeting the ball downfield, past the sticks, where it's maximizing your big play potential. Now, That's tough because you want to stay on schedule and you want to push the ball, but a little too often it's felt like sometimes he's moving to his check down too late or too soon, and he's missing his reads when he really shouldn't. He was 34th in the league in passing grade on passes over 20 yards. So that's troublesome when you're like, man, this guy's got a really big arm. And his MO coming out was that he kind of checked down a little bit too much. But then when he got the shot to start, he was throwing the ball a little bit, got a little careless at times, and that really affected, I think, his approach and his mentality. And now he's a little gun shy to push the ball down the field. In preseason so far, we've only seen 6 dropbacks from him. And it didn't really look like the processing took a step. He was a couple, beats late on a few reads that really you think that he shouldn't be late on. He checked down some balls that you thought maybe you could make something happen with. So it's tough because week 1 is approaching and we still really don't know what we're going to get out of Will Levis. And so that's kind of where we sit with him from a football standpoint, and kind of why where you see him at the end of these drafts where he does have some upside, maybe if you're going to stash him on your bench. But right now, I think the player that you're getting isn't the one that we're hoping is his ceiling.
Yeah, and it's funny because you brought up Tech. I was racking my brain trying to think of the other teams in the division. It's the 2 teams in the division that people are talking about are the Colts and the Texans. That's where the hype is, and right. and that's what I think is kind of sitting on top of the Titans. I think a lot of people remember the Titans being basically the worst team in football last year. Right. And it's like, well, okay. So, but to your point, they've really revamped this because of the cheap rookie contract. They were able to go out and turn this over. So it's been kind of interesting. I know what you mean from a real football standpoint. Jason, what do you expect from fantasy for Will Levis? How do you feel about it?
Well, so Mason kind of touched on it, and I'm kind of curious because we don't know, but how much more do you think they're going to pass from last year? Because that's really where you get stuck with Will Levis. Yeah. Because if he's going to throw 500 times, he's not going to be great. I mean, he's not going to be that quarterback that you want him to be. He's going to have to get closer to that 600 number. And historically, the Titans haven't thrown that much. So if you believe in a new head coach and them going to pass, I mean, he could easily move up. I have him very low because, again, going off of historical data, which is what I like to do. I know it's a new head coach, so things are going to change.
Running back 2 would be the other thing, which
we'll
get into.
Again, it's just, do you really believe that they're going to have this rookie not really rookie. It is what, second year? Second
year. This is year 2.
Do you think he's going to throw 600 times? Because if that's the case, yeah, I'd probably be taking him. You're also hoping that he's going to actually complete more than 62% of passes.
That'd be nice, but
I'm trying to be I'm really trying to help him statistically here. So currently, I don't have him anywhere near those. I do have him about 62%. So I gave him the boost there because, he should connect. Having more reps usually helps you get a little more accurate. You decide where you're going to go. You kind of know plays a little better. He only played like 6 or 7 games last year. And so it's just really what you're thinking this offense is going to be. I know it used to lean very heavily on King Henry. Well, he's not there. So does that mean that he's going to pass more to the running backs? Does that mean he's just going to pass more in general? They added more weapons. It's a real gray area. I mean, I can easily see him doing well if they throw 600 times. It's just them getting to that number terrifies me.
Yeah, that's kind of my issue.
That's a big pendulum swing from
that's my issue as well, is that I like Will Levis fine, but historically this team doesn't throw enough to really have a QB that vaults up into the upper echelon of QB. Like, if you were telling me that Will Levis could get into the top 12 in fantasy, I'd just not really seeing how. Something would need to really break his way. Some people would need to get hurt, or he would need to be his efficiency would need to be way higher than what I think it could be, or they would need to just be better at moving the ball so he's just constantly in the red zone. And I don't really see all those things happening. The way I look at Will Levis for this year, my recommendation on it is he's a streamer. It's not somebody I'm going to draft. I'm going to let someone else draft him if that's what they want to do. because I think at some point they're going to get frustrated and they're going to cut. So the way I look at Will Levis is that he's kind of a matchup play and he's kind of a streamer. And that's just kind of how I view it this year. Now, that being said, it's the NFL and things are weird. And he's got better weapons than what Ryan Tannehill had. And it's a different team with a different coach. So it is going to look different. But I don't know that I feel obligated to have to make him my backup in a draft.
Yeah, even backup, that's scary too. I mean, a lot of upside. Completely understand. Matchup dependent, I'm completely on board with that. But, I mean, like I said, even with 600, I don't have him breaking top 24 QB.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying. He's a streamer. Just
no,
let
I
it,
agree.
let
and
it be.
I think that this is one of those things that we're having the conversation on Will Levis before his experience has set in. So this is one of those guys, leave him, like the guys are telling you, leave him on the waiver. Maybe put this note in the back of your mind that Will Levis has a solid foundation to build on. And we've seen worse quarterbacks with worse foundations progress. So if he can get this experience under his belt, start processing plays faster, the more reps he's get, that's tends to be what you hope. Like the more fresh reps, the more good reps. That's kind of where we talk about, I think you can ruin a quarterback. And I think that they haven't quite, ruined him by pressuring him so much. So they just need to protect him, get him clean reps, and that experience will build. This time next year, we might be talking about a whole different look. So just something to kind of keep an eye on your waiver wire throughout the year. It might not pan out, but this isn't a risk to take in your drafts, frankly.
No, I wouldn't. Yeah. And I will say the other thing that I'll be having my eye on as I look at him is the rushing. How much rushing am I actually getting? And that's what historic, but the sample is so narrow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like historically, yes, he hasn't run at all, but does that change? I don't know. There's a lot of unknowns here. And that's why I'm saying it's not really something I want to draft, but it is something that I would keep in mind because we just don't have enough data to really, I don't want to throw it away. Like, oh no, I've seen this before. I know what it is. I don't. If I did, I would tell you, but I don't. This is something that it's like, we're just going to have to see how it develops. But there's enough negative markers that it's like, just let someone else. If they really want to draft him, go ahead. Because I think in a couple weeks, they'll probably get frustrated and cut him. And then you could pick him up and use him as a spot starter because during buys, I could see how he would become valuable during buys and in really, really good matchups. Sure. There are a few because the Titans' schedule is outside of the division.
Yeah,
pretty soft.
Yeah,
like they're not playing anybody good outside of the division, so there will be opportunity to look at this in the future. But it's a conversation for Mondays throughout the season for the waiver wire. We've mentioned it a couple times, but Derrick Henry is no longer on this team. It's kind of amazing to say that, but Derrick Henry no longer on this team. So they've gone out and they got Tony Pollard. Tells you what the Cowboys thought of Tony Pollard, huh? So there you go. So Tony Pollard is now the new running back, and returning. There's no point in talking about this in any other way than in tandem. Returning Tajay Spears, who I am on record as saying is here for a good time, not a long time. Like Tajay Spears, the player, the man has no ACL in either knee,
and is not scared.
Yeah, today. Remember my conversation about Damian Harris? Gonna be great in the NFL briefly. Because this is scary with Todd. Hey, no one's going to argue about Tajay Spears' talent today. But yeah, he is not somebody that I'm looking at as like a long-term fixture in the NFL. Just based on his injury history coming in and where he's at. And it's like, okay, looks good right now because he's healthy right now. I don't know how this is going to go long-term. But for right now, he's there and he's looking good. So Tony Pollard opens as the RB26, which is like ADP of 79, call it 80. It's pretty attractive considering where he was going in other years. Some of that has to do with what we just talked about. Tajay Spears opens as the RB35, ADP 95. And this is where I think people are going to be like, well, Neil, isn't that a must handcuff? And I'm going to say no, because I'm not spending back-to-back picks. Like if I'm doing that, no, because you'd have to start them both. Realistically, and that's not something I'm going to advocate for. You're going to have to make your decisions. This is one where you got to pick. What do you like? And so
coaches have even said it. It's a 1A, 1B situation.
Yeah, it's a 1A, 1B. They're going to go with the hot hand. And this is where I want to go to Mason. So Mason, break it down. Where are we at with these two guys from real football?
I mean, so you're looking at kind of like you just said, they're 1A and 1B in this backfield. So you're really not going to handcuff them because it's just a vulture situation pretty much all season long. You're just going to pick one, take your lumps where you can, and it is what it is.
I think it's going to be highly frustrating. To that point.
It's one of these things that Tony Pollard is probably going to take more of the groundwork because he can still pass catch. He is still a half decent blocker in the backfield. So it's not like you can't put him on the field on third downs. Tajee Spears is just better. And he's a little bit better than Tajee in, the run game, a little bit in between the tackles. I've always really liked Tony Pollard's vision. I think he's an excellent one cut back in zone schemes, which is where the question with him comes this year. So Pollard was still fairly effective last year. I think that it's a little bit discounted because he had the higher workload and people were expecting that step forward that he didn't take, which is okay, but he still had sort of similar numbers just with that bigger workload. But one of the big things was Dallas was kind of struggling with what they were figuring out in the run game on offense. They were not really the best blocking. So Dallas averaged just under the league average in rushing yards before contact, about 1.2, which isn't a ton, especially when Tony Pollard wasn't really a guy that was known for, kind of bowling through guys. You need to give him a little bit of space, let him make his cut and feed through your blocking like a lot of good zone schemes do. Now, to be honest, Tennessee wasn't better than Dallas in that regard last year. They were actually among the worst teams in the NFL in yards before contact, but the difference is they had an absolute mammoth in the backfield. So that's just how it works. But what we do see is they've made some investments along their offensive line. Let me see. I have it pulled up right here with some of their names. So they took J.C. Latham. He's going to be starting at left tackle for them. Peter Skoronsky, a first-round pick for them the year before. Lloyd Cushenberry, free agent signing.
In the NFL forever, though.
Yeah, Denver. 4 years. Denver tackle. I mean, this is his second contract.
That's forever in NFL terms.
Dylan Redunds, who is a second-round pick from a year ago, and then they're a little bit lighter on right tackle, but all in all, they've made investments to this offensive line. That's 2 first-round picks on the left side. They have a free agent signing at center who was a third-round pick. Now, he wasn't exactly like the epitome of what you can get out of a third-round pick at center or whatever. But, it's an investment. And then Redunds, a second-round pick at guard. Now, these are things that if you can let these guys get some time together and mold together, maybe they're pushing a pretty good offensive line come week 4, 5, 6, and they really get their feet under them. And we might be talking about a different story where Tony Pollard has holes the size of, dump trucks, and he can really run wherever we want. And that's what you want in a perfect world. Now, we'll probably be somewhere a little bit lower than that where Tony Pollard, does well. One of the other issues I'm really hoping for is that they move more towards a zone scheme in their new system.
Yeah.
Last year, they were kind of wishy-washy in what they wanted to run. They ran a lot of gap stuff. They ran a lot of zone. They really didn't have like a favorite method to run the ball, which struggled with all of them, and they never really got any rhythm in the run game. So that's something you hope to approach as they move forward. And then you just have Spears. Spears, like I said, he's just a little bit better in the receiving game. Like you said, knee issues, but honestly, it's because he's one of the most elusive guys in the league. I understand why the ligaments break down under the pressure of his cuts because he's vicious in that regard. 27 forced missed tackles on receiving plays. That's second most among backs last season. So very productive. He is a good back in the receiving game. I think they'll try to spell them a little bit, but there's no specific, hey, your first 2 down back, you're the third down back. They're going to interchange.
I could see this being a situation where they alternate drives. I could see this being a situation where it's like it starts off the game where it's like Tony Pollard gets the first 2 series, and then he's like they spell him on third down, and then it flips, and then Spears is back there because you can't not have Spears back there because teams will start keying on that. So you have to let him run up between the tackles a little bit, because otherwise you'll be too predictable. So it is a weird thing. Jason, given their ADPs, who do you like in fantasy?
The cheaper option, always. And of course, it's the Memphis guy. I like Tajee. We went over this last year.
But what about all the new people that we're reaching that we've never talked to before, Jason? What about those people? They don't know. They weren't watching roster of the people last year. How do they know?
Well, you know,
Everybody go back and watch.
Yeah.
Don't laugh
Roster
at
the
that
people.
dismissively. Don't laugh at that dismissively. Don't laugh at that dismissively. Like I don't know what the numbers are. Duh.
that's fair. But the dude, again, he's just so explosive. We keep talking about it because guess what? He has extremely high burst score. That is the one
Yeah.
area of his game that is incredibly measured, and it shows every time he's on the field. If he's going to hit a hole, he's going to hit it hard and go. And it's just that's his player. Tony Pollard, overall, much better running back. Tajay just he gets it in his hand, he's gone. Like you have to. He's not super fast, but he's going to get away from you because he's just quick. I know it's weird, fast and quick, but
No, there's a
very
difference.
different things.
Fast in a straight line versus quick in the cuts is a very different thing.
You potentially couldn't tackle this guy in a phone booth.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
He's also smaller, which makes it even worse because he's hiding behind all these giant linemen.
Tajay Spears is very good at change of direction, and he'll make you look foolish.
Yeah.
Whereas Tony Pollard is more likely just to try and stiff arm you or to shove you out of his way. Tajay Spears isn't going to do that. He might put his arm up, but that's subterfuge. That's a misdirection. He's going to make it look like he's going to stiff arm you, and then he's just going to run away from you. And it's like I've seen him do it, and I've seen people commit to the stiff arm and then fall down, which is really embarrassing for a pro defender to do that. It's like you don't see that often, but I've seen Tajay do it. My concern about Tajay Spears, as I will continue to point out, is especially in Dynasty, one good knock to the knee, career over. Like career over. But that didn't happen yet. And this is redraft where I don't care. So, like I could get behind the whole Tajay thing. I'll tell you what scares me about Tony Pollard is you mentioned the Dallas thing. Dallas got so frustrated without being able to. It's not really Tony Pollard's fault, but Dallas got so frustrated last year. Mason, you yourself brought this up on the Dallas show. They just quit trying to run the ball at all.
Yeah, they just stopped running the ball at one point. They just stopped.
They just stopped. They knew they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And my concern here is that I could see something like that happening here in Tennessee where they just get frustrated to the point where it's like, all right, we're in hurry up the whole game. Go. I could see that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I could see that scenario playing out. So I will say I am not super interested in Tony Pollard this year. If it falls to me at the 80 ADP, okay. It depends on how my team is looking, but I'm not going to pound the table. Like I've seen some other people that are pounding the table saying, no, Tony Pollard's going to pick up the Derrick Henry workload. I'm like, you couldn't prove that to me. You don't have the data points that would be necessary to prove to me beyond a reasonable doubt that that's actually going to happen.
I hope that nobody ever has to be saddled with as many carries as they would give Derrick Henry over the last 3, 4, 5 years. That's a lot. That's a lot of workload. And, another thing to tie into this whole thing, we have to talk about game script. We didn't even mention game script. And as Jason mentioned, he wants the cheaper guy. Well, guess what? That's also the guy that's going to be probably more conducive to their game script.
They're going to be losing a lot.
They're going to be behind quite a bit.
They've made some improvements, but the defense isn't really where they've made a lot of improvements. The defense is still going to be pretty bad.
I mean, so so this like veteran rejuvenation has extended to their defense a little bit. Specifically their secondary, which was a huge, they couldn't cover anybody last year.
Their secondary was like the worst secondary in football last year.
Exactly. So what you needed to do was they got veteran safeties, and now they're going to have some decent play at corner. You're hoping that they can hold up to give them an opportunity to take their lumps on offense and learn. Now, is that going to come together in year one? I don't know. Maybe not. But it's one of those things that, hey, if they can put something together and not a net negative on defense, they can be a better team. But it's like you said, they're getting discounted because they were just there. They were
so bad last year at every level of football. Like they were bad at every position except for Derrick Henry.
Right. Yeah, running back.
Like everybody was bad, and that's why this whole thing had to happen. So, speaking of things that are completely different, wide receiver, it's totally different. So, they go out and get Calvin Ridley, which is interesting because that's the rare like interdivisional thing. It wasn't really a trade, but you take my meaning. Like it's a little weird to see a guy literally just change teams within the division. But they go and get Calvin Ridley. They go out and get DeAndre Hopkins, which I think is interesting because you're trying to see what's left in the DeAndre Hopkins tank because he's been a perennial all-star, right? We've talked about DeAndre Hopkins for how many years in a row? God, it feels like my whole life.
Yeah.
This is actually his second year with the Titans.
Yeah,
But-
he was
okay.
right. So this
He's
is
the,
the,
but
I'm
that
pretty
was
sure
a
this is, yeah.
that's a okay. Fair
Again,
enough.
I was
It's
just
his-
making sure because
Was that
Right.
in season last year or was that preseason? Because I don't remember.
I think preseason. I think he played
Might
all
have been
of his
preseason.
games there, but
I don't
think he was
remember.
healthy
I
for
don't
it.
remember, but
He wasn't healthy for most of it.
he wasn't healthy for most of it, so it feels like we're
Right.
going to get into that too. And then they go out and get Tyler Boyd, who we've talked about also for years on this show. And Tyler Boyd is now there. So, and then that's on top of having Treylon Burks, former first-round pick Treylon Burks, that got a bunch of people fired. Remember when people were trying to tell me that Treylon Burks was the equivalent of AJ Brown, and I laughed in their face. And I've never been more right about anything in my entire life. Because people were like, "Oh, AJ Brown is not that good. He's the same thing as Treylon Burks," and I pointed and laughed at them. And then the Eagles won a Super Bowl, and then everyone in Tennessee got fired because of that decision. And I was like, "Yeah, it'd be like that sometimes." I don't know why they thought that was the case, but okay, like there you go. So that's your wide receiver room, and there's a reason why they felt they need to do this, even with Treylon Burks still on the team. That they've had, because last year this wide receiver room was like the worst in football. It was nothing. It was just nothing. Like just nothing on this team you wanted. It was a total ghost town. It was really bad. At least now you have veterans that have done stuff. You've had every single one of those veterans I named have had success at other points in their career. Every single one. So Calvin Ridley is the one that people are most bullish on. He opens as the wide receiver 32, ADP of 75. DeAndre Hopkins is not far behind. He opens as the wide receiver 39, ADP of 99. And then we're going to pause there because those are the two that are actually being drafted. So, Mason, what do you like about, we'll try to do it in tandem. What do you like about the Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins tandem, assuming that DeAndre Hopkins is actually healthy?
Well, he has been banged up a little bit in camp. So that's kind of your first indication that, when you take DeAndre Hopkins, that's the world you live in.
Yep.
Is that you're going to deal with some injury from time to time. He's going to be game time decision most of the week.
He's also going to try to play through it.
He's not going to practice sometimes. He might take 3 snaps. Right, you said it. He might take 3 snaps at the beginning of the game and not be able to play through it. That's just the world you live in when you take DeAndre Hopkins. He also was kind of, him and Will Levis were the only flashes in the passing game at all for them last year. And it was kind of like in that big first start, and everybody tried to ride that high for the rest of the year, and it just never repeated. So that's what you have to understand when you live in the world of DeAndre Hopkins. And then add on top of it that they just paid another receiver quite a bit of money to come there and also play for them in Calvin Ridley. So what we're going to see is you're not really going to know what you're going to get out of DeAndre Hopkins. I'm much more comfortable taking Calvin Ridley. But with that being said, they haven't, being Calvin Ridley and Will Levis, haven't necessarily looked super cohesive in their limited showing in the preseason. And reports out of camp aren't exactly blowing the doors off of their connection. A lot of the times,
local beat reporters keep flatly talking about how the two of them cannot get on the same page. And when all 3 of them were healthy, Levis was just feeding Hopkins.
Right.
And that's every camp report.
Exactly.
Every beat writer.
And so it's one of those things that it's like, we have a lot of questions here. If you're going to make an investment, I would probably go elsewhere. And we can talk about that separately as dart throw territory later when we talk about Tyler Boyd. But right now, I think there's a lot of uncertainty because when you have veteran groups, you get veteran problems. And these are what veteran problems are, is uncertainty with injury and uncertainty if the free agency signing was even worth it. And if these guys are going to mesh and mold it all together, because sometimes that's just the way it works. If sometimes these guys just don't end up getting on the same page and it takes forever to do. And then we get into week 6 and it's just like, sorry. So that's where you go when you live in this Titans wide receiver room. Could they be good? Is, like I said at the top of the show, this team is built so this veteran leadership can prop up the young quarterback contract that they have. Now, in theory, that's sound. Now, in practice, that's another question. So that's something that we're going to have to see.
Jason, is either of that, any of the veterans on this team, of the two, any of that do anything for you?
It's going to be the guy who's already played with him 1 year.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, and that's what it comes down to. Also, he saw 137 targets last year to lead this team, and was wide receiver 22 last year. So yeah, I'm going to take Hopkins at that price, especially because that's a deal, even if he is busted.
I would actually like it to be a little cheaper.
I know you would,
injury, but
this is still a discount.
It's still a decent discount. I'm not super. I've never been a Calvin Ridley guy, and it's not even like I think he's bad. He's just not my cup of tea, just in general for what I like in PPR. He's just not really my cup of tea. Whereas Hopkins very much is my cup of tea when it comes to PPR. Huge hands, superb route runner, has displayed this again and again and again and again and again, whether it was in Houston or Arizona. It hasn't mattered. The one thing about Hopkins is that he's getting old. And who among us can't say the same? You know what I mean? It's just the way it works.
1,000 yards last year.
It's just the way it works. Exactly. He had 1,000 yards last year on a team that was puke, where he was the guy, undisputed, drawing the one coverage. Guess what? I don't think that's going to be the case this year. So if I'm taking one of the high-priced items, it's going to be Hopkins, and I'm going to leave Ridley to be somebody else's problem. I'm not going to deal with it. And historically, that lines up with my historical analysis on Calvin Ridley, where it's like, yeah, I'm not really interested. If we were playing in non-PPR formats, I might have a little more of a different opinion for you. But in PPR, I gravitate towards DeAndre Hopkins just because I have seen this movie so many times that it's kind of like Derrick Henry, where it's like, until I see it fail, we are continuing to go back to this well. And it's just, it just makes sense. And the best part is I don't need him to be a top 12 receiver anymore. Don't even need that. Don't need you to do it. So
wide receiver 3, we're straight.
Yeah, I'm fine with the idea of getting him at wide receiver 3 value for something that I think could very easily backdoor into wide receiver 2 territory without really too much help. As long as he's not permanently hurt. That's my concern. And then we have to expand this conversation out a little bit. So Tyler Boyd was also brought in basically to do the Cincinnati job he had, which was play the slot. And for years, I have said Tyler Boyd, people, I remember, I'm glad we don't have this conversation in earnest anymore. People are like, is Tyler Boyd like a real? No, he's not. He's not a top 24 wide receiver. Tyler Boyd is just really, really good at that job, at playing the slot and being a role player. I would take Tyler Boyd on any team I was building in the real NFL to play the slot and to be a real role player. But Tyler Boyd, we've tried for years to make him be a true elite. No.
He likes beating up on linebackers. That's what it really comes down to.
He's great at it.
Yeah.
But Tyler Boyd comes in as the wide receiver 81, ADP 261. He is not being drafted at all. And that's where I think it gets interesting because that could be wrong. What do you guys think about that? Is that wrong? Should Tyler Boyd be a flyer at the end of your draft, or should you just leave this on the waiver wire? And does the health of DeAndre Hopkins play into that at all?
I think it's a dart throw. I think it's a dart throw among many at the end of the round, and they're all for, whoever you're vibing with, frankly. And the reason being is because you could get worse than a guy that's going to be starting in the slot, who's known for getting quite a bit of volume. While it's on a different offense, he is just a guy that does his role very well, which is volume slot. And when like I said earlier with Will Levis, he has been to the point where he's kind of throwing these quick read check downs and things like that. I don't like to call somebody like check down Charlie or Captain.
Well, I don't want to call him the game manager until I know.
Right. So it's one of these things that when it's used with a negative connotation, it's not exact. It doesn't describe, potential positives in that play style where there is effective use of checking the ball down in the game. That's why it exists. That's why every play in the passing game has a check down drawn into it. It's because they work. But when guys get too, keen to move to their check down, that becomes an issue. And so you want him to be able to progress in his reads. But for right now, maybe early in the process, it might be worth a dart throw because he could be seeing quite a bit of volume being this guy that's going to run these short outs, these drags, these quick overs, these things that are probably going to be early reads, short reads into a lot of this offense. So from a scheme standpoint, it might make sense to take this dart throw because they could get worse. You either take something that you're going to get points on at the end of your draft, or you're taking your super crazy high upside.
Yeah, you're taking
pick.
Javon Baker, and you're just going to hope you can hold on to it.
Yeah, it depends on what you're shopping for. So
your other option is you can get somebody who's hurt, put him in your IR, and pick him up for free.
Yeah, see how that goes. Yeah, like see how that goes, and then cut him.
Nick
Chubb,
you can do that. Or something along those lines, and then you can pick him up. I mean, after your draft's over, pretty much.
Yeah, so, I could see that because the one thing I will say, I do like the point on the scheme, because the one thing that has come through in the camp reports is if you want to talk about connection, Will Levis has already been rapidly establishing a connection with Tyler Boyd to the point where it looks like he trusts him. That's every beat reporter too, where it's like Tyler Boyd has another big day, and it's one of those situations where I could see why, because if that's the scheme and that's the system, and he's the built-in check down basically, oh my, he could have serious volume, just not a lot of upside as far as red zone work or anything like that goes. But hey, I don't really care if you know
he sees 100 targets.
If all you are gonna, even if you got 80, considering you weren't being drafted, okay, 80's fine, especially if they're all short yardage targets and you're gonna catch 75 of them. Like that's something where I could see, given your roster construction, I could see Tyler Boyd being a good dart throw at the end of your draft, and we just see where it goes. I could also see a situation where DeAndre Hopkins is actually really hurt, and then we could put DeAndre Hopkins in the IR, and then we just play Tyler Boyd for a couple weeks, and then we just see how that goes.
Unfortunately, the tough part about that is that's going to affect Treylon Burks more.
I know. I know. Well, the nice thing about
Boyd.
Treylon Burks is we don't really have to talk much about Treylon Burks, and we will do it quickly. Treylon Burks is not being drafted. He has no ADP, and he should not be being drafted. Treylon Burks is well on his way to being a huge first-round bust, and the problem with Treylon Burks is that he himself is now also gimpy for the third year in a row. He's practicing. Good for him. But what really hurts Treylon Burks is that the new coaching staff, has already said that he's going to have to play special teams if he wants to play on this team. And that is not what you want to hear about your first-round pick from 2 years ago. You really don't want to hear that your former first-round pick is going to have to be a gunner on special teams. That tells me that they don't view him as a thing.
No, that's Westbrook Akini's job, man. You can't be messing with that.
Yeah, well, my point is that if we're going to talk about other things that people might actually, before we even got the Treylon Burks, we might as well talk about tight end Chiggy Okonkwo, who is not being drafted. He comes in as the tight end 23, ADP 208. No one's drafting Chiggy Okonkwo. Post-hype sleeper, Chiggy Okonkwo. Last year was a big name people were talking about and was very disappointing because the whole team just went soup sandwich. I will say I'm not super interested in Chiggy Okonkwo.
Mostly because of Tyler Boyd.
Yeah, actually. That's actually the main reason.
The transitive property works right there.
Yeah, exactly. Because there can really only be one checkdown king. And I've seen both of these people play football. And Tyler Boyd, in my estimation, is a significantly better.
Is the king.
Significantly better player than Chiggy Okonkwo.
I mean, you had a tight end on a team who ran the ball constantly.
Yeah.
And he was absent run blocker. He was an absentee run blocker.
He's not good at it.
So
that's why they have people like Nick Vannett, who's still there, by the way, to do that job. Like,
yeah, it's hard to see the field in a running offense playing tight end if you can't block.
Right. So I'm not a big fan of Chiggy Okonkwo this year. I know some people are. I'm not expecting the bounce back season. If you're asking me, my opinion, if I'm picking middle of the field targets on this team, give me Tyler Boyd. Yes. I'd much rather deal with that. So it's interesting. There's not a lot on this team that I'm super interested in drafting. It's kind of DeAndre Hopkins and maybe a little bit of Tajay Spears. I know Jason feels much more strongly about the Tajay Spears thing than I do.
Yeah, I mean, because I've seen him. I watched a lot of him because he was an AAC player.
That's true.
Tulane, baby.
That is true.
Him and
my big thing about Tajay Spears that I just can't mentally get past is the fact that his knees are like hanging by a thread, and that's everybody. My knees are hanging by a thread too, but I don't love it. Like that screams one awkward twist and IR and we're done. Like I don't love
and that's
it. But
the other thing about this team, right, is that they had this guy who was just superhuman, and now they have two normal human players that they're going to have to split that work between.
Right.
So seeing how that works out, going with the guy who's going to burst through everything he can until he explodes.
The guy's going to catch the passes, we think. At least we think. So, I don't know. To me, this is a hard one. I get why this analysis for a lot of people is all over the road this year. Because it's like, it's hard to pin down. There's just so much uncertainty that the one thing I gravitate towards is DeAndre Hopkins, because that's the movie I've seen that I enjoyed. It's like The Godfather. It's like, I enjoyed that. Do more. And then it's like Godfather 3 happens, and it's like, okay, never mind.
Too many.
Yeah, too far. But like, that's the one thing that I have kind of like highlighted for me, where it's like, I'm still a believer in the DeAndre Hopkins experience. The rest of it, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'll take that, and I'll take Tyler Boyd at the end of the draft for nothing, for a dart throw. And even then, I might just let it ride if there were other things available that I would like more, things with more upside.
Yeah.
But we're looking for positives here. I will say, I do think from real football terms, this team will be better.
They should be.
Yeah.
They made investments to be better. Now, do they put it all together? Still remains to be seen.
Well, here's the other thing about that, Mason. Them being better than last year is kind of the most backhanded compliment you could give somebody, because that bar was so low that it's a tripping hazard in hell.
No. As I call Denver home, so I know how that feels to anybody out there, any Tennessee natives out there. Trust me, I know how you feel. It's not a slight. Baby steps. We'll get there.
It is baby steps. I will say, like I said, at least they're not talking about dusting off Tannehill again. At least they were smart enough to not be like, no, we're going to bring back Tannehill and Derrick Henry again. Because it's like, dude, no, the window on that is closed. You can't keep doing that. We had to move. You've got to move on. As much as fun as it was to watch Tannehill have the career resurgence and to watch Derrick Henry beat King Henry, it was so fun for all those years, but you got to stop.
Isn't it awesome that A.J. Brown was so good that he made Brian Tannehill look so good?
Yes.
Isn't that funny how
that
works?
And it's also hilarious to me that people are like, oh, no, that's just because A.J. Brown was a system player. And I'm like, no, honey. No, that man's the truth.
You're about to see it this year.
And then he leaves and they win a Super Bowl and then everyone gets fired in Tennessee. And I'm like, yeah, hate to tell you, but that's what you deserved. Like, because one of the dumbest moves that front office made was not extending A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
They needed to give A.J. Brown what would be the NBA equivalent of a 4-year Supermax contract. That's what the smart move was. And Tennessee's like, bruh, I could find A.J. Browns anywhere. And I'm like, hate to tell you, that's not what you're looking at. That's not what that is. Like, they don't just make guys that are that tall, that are that fast, whose hands are that big, with that level vertical. Like, those guys don't just exist. You got to go.
Built an X receiver on Madden, it looks like A.J. Brown.
It would be A.J. Brown. Right, exactly. Yeah. It would just be A.J. Brown. Like, that's what it is. Like, there's like 12 guys that look like that.
DK.
Yeah, kind of similar-ish. Like, yeah, you're looking at like a very limited thing, and then to just be that arrogant that you're like, and I don't even hate Treylon Burks. I know this podcast comes across as like Neil just hates Treylon Burks. It's not even that. It's just I can do the thing that the Titans have also failed at in previous years, which is the picture. We put two things next to each other and then determine what looks the same. And I'm referencing the famous Derrick Henry, Dion Lewis picture, which I'm dating the hell out of myself with. But like, that was the same team that was like, this picture it's not the same thing. Like, it's not. And that's where it's like, you put those two guys next to each other in pads, and anybody who's like, yeah, it's the same thing. It's like, bro, no. What are you looking at? Like, am I blind or are you? Because and then we got to see it in real time where A.J. Brown went and won a Super Bowl. I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So anyway, I will say I am looking forward to them being better than what I think than what they were last year, and what I think people in the general media think they're going to be. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in football, which is what I think a lot of people are projecting in real NFL circles. Like, if you watch ESPN, this is being projected to be a bottom 3 football team, and I don't think they're that bad. I could tell you they're outside the bottom 3. Are they outside the bottom 5? Maybe.
With how much they spent in free agency, Lord, for
I
that
would
front
hope
office,
you could
I
get
hope not.
bottom 5, but yeah, it's still. We'll see. It's to your point, Mason. It's about whether or not the veterans can gel, which is always a question.
Right.
Speaking of bottom 5 football teams in the NFL, tune in tomorrow to watch what has been perennially a bottom 5 team in the NFL trying to haul itself up out of the basement as we sit down to talk about
out of the basement.
What's that?
Hail itself up out of the basement? No? Come on, that was good.
For Jason, for Mason, for Neil, tune in tomorrow to talk about the Washington Commanders. Keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzrow from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!